Hello, today I'm going to be talking to you about research I did over the summer on comparative analysis of AI chatbots for computer program generation. Dr. Ridwan Noel was my mentor during this. He's not going to be joining us today. Um, okay. So, as an introduction, the main focus for this was to see exactly how well certain AI models and chatbots could create and generate their own programs. So, how well did they complete the task that was given to them with a prompt? Basically, how much experience is needed to also use like the working computer program, because that was another focus is are these chatbots able to allow someone with little to no computer science experience to create programs that could then be used in like professional or just personal settings? And then by analyzing these, we can get a better idea of how the how well the chatbots basically um, complete the tasks given to them, which could help with improvements later down the line on people needing like to improve how well they actually complete the task. And then, as well as I mentioned before, the type of experience someone needs to know to use these tools. All right. On the slide, I do have some examples of the prompts I've been doing. I did 15 prompts for the different AI chatbots. I had them create programs in Python. Example, like I had them create a Python program that uses inheritance to simulate a family tree. I had them simulate a client server messenger program, as well as like more simple things such as it makes an array that takes 5 integers inputs and displays them like maximum minimum value. Here are some examples of the prompt create a program in Python that creates a queue to simulate a ticket counter. On the screen, I have the two chatbots, ChatGPT and Meta. For the all of the chatbots I had out of them were Dev AI, ZZZ Code as some of the ones that are lesser known, Claude, Meta, ChatGPT, Gemini, and here, as you can see, for the most part, um, at least for these two, it's pretty similar. They have some variations, but when we compare it to stuff like Code Convert and ZZZ Code, as you can see, these two are extremely similar, only different in like the fact that they, in like the main execution, what they're calling like is a little bit different. This can indicate that they may be powered or basically sourced by like the same model, or they could be just the data that was chosen to train them was so similar. But as you can see, these are also a lot shorter than the ones on the previous slide, which can play into exactly like how much memory they take up, as well as whether or not it is overly complicated to the point to where it takes up like needless, basically unnecessary space, as well as if someone doesn't have as much experience, then they could look at it and they're not going to know exactly like what does what. So if they do need to adjust it at all, they might not be able to do that. And then Dev AI and Copilot. As you can see, Copilot also does have a style, like not necessarily a style difference, but a format differences into where they have a space in between every single line. Dev AI, as you can see, decided to go with the SymPy route, which actually could prove a problem for people with less experience, because rather than just simply copy pasting the code into like a something to run it like Visual Studio Code, they're gonna have to get and download like SymPy, or even for some of these like NumPy, which are these like basically kind of extensions. I guess that's how I'd kind of describe them, extensions to like Python and everything, which can include like data sets and different functions. And then here is Gemini. Gemini was a lot longer. These are both for Gemini. Both Gemini and Claude were models that tended to be longer, Claude immensely so, as I will show you in some of the later slides. As you can see, again, the formatting. This one, the one with Gemini, though, for people with less experience, in this one, these green comments right here, the hashtag basically makes it to where this is a comment in the code, not actually part of like the program running, actually explaining what certain things do or noting what section does what, which is helpful for people who wouldn't necessarily understand the code, or honestly, even people who do understand the code with organization, comments are just good to have. Here is Claude's. Now for Claude, Claude went above and beyond with a lot of the prompts. Claude would generate a lot. Not that this was necessarily a bad thing. It could be a good thing if you're not really like specific on what you want like the program fully like to do in terms of like if you're wanting to make like a game or something like that. But in terms of storage space, as well as under like how well you can understand it if you don't have experience, Claude makes things extremely complicated, or just, well, they'll add features you didn't even ask for. All right. And then here is an example of Dev AI using the program to use inheritance to simulate a family tree. However, I added this here because I wanted to mention that one of the main criteria that we tested it on is whether or not it actually completes the task given. So here it does seem to like simulate a family tree, but it doesn't actually use multiple like class inheritance. It only has one class and then a bunch of lists like in those classes. Here is another example of Claude I wanted to provide, which is the same prompt as the previous slide. I included to the side, as you can see, this long stream of code. Claude did not just create a family tree. Claude decided to create an entire story line, as in it would like, it has like retirement years, it has different like traits of each family member, as well as even like it would give like the grandfather a story, like when I was young, we walked 10 miles to school in the snow. It went above and beyond, which, while I mean, it's not necessarily bad in the sense that it's like it's cool that it would do this, but if I'm creating a program and I'm taking different snippets of AI code and they're this big, or it adds up over time to where it's going to make a very big file. All right. So here is the table of the AI chatbot code evaluation. So I tested it on if it would run without intervention, meaning I could run it without having to actually edit anything in the code. So basically I copy paste it. I didn't have to edit anything. And I task manipulated whether or not it actually did complete the task asked of it, the amount of errors that were in the code, the runtime efficiency score, as well as the amount of storage space that it took up. So as you can see here, for the most part, all of them were, none of them were necessarily bad, really, per se. You can complete the task at hand with it. You may have to enter the prompt or like alter the prompt a little bit for some of these, because as you can see, not all of them were able to run without intervention, and not all of them were able to complete the task, as the one before with the Dev AI not using the inheritance. I can consider that not completing the task because it didn't use inheritance in it. For example, like with code convert, it was one of the prompts was basically asking the AI to make a website and code convert did not have like HTML, but the code that it did for make didn't have necessarily an error in it. So the amount of errors, all of them were extremely minimal. There was not really much that had to be edited at all. Honestly, someone with little to no experience could use these and simply ask a follow-up question if there was any issues. So all of the, honestly, I do have scores for these to see like which ones are on the better end, but again, all of these were decent tools. None of them were necessarily bad. So runtime efficiency, so how well basically the code actually runs, how efficient it is with like what it is doing. And as you can see here, I have basically like labeled, this was based off of the basically like big O like runtime. So like the different efficiencies, like whether it was like using formulas or how it was structured to like deal with the task at hand. And then also the storage space, which as you can see, like I mentioned earlier, for Claude, it was high, and for Gemini, it was extremely high too. Claude being the highest though, because it would make a ton of code that wasn't basically an add-on to the prompt. It's as if it added on to your own prompt that you had. Okay. And then here's just kind of an AI information and score table, because this also did go into their scores. So the number of languages for each of these chatbots, I didn't give too many points like linked to this, due to the fact that it was very hard to find a definitive like answer on how many languages they know, because you'd have some that wouldn't give you a direct answer. You'd have some that would basically include like little, basically not an entire another language. It would be like segments of like a particular language, or like small little things. I also like marked whether or not the AI chatbot would do debugging. All of them except Code Convert did this. If they would refactor the code or basically make it better, all of them but Code Convert did this. And then whether or not they provide an explanation. All of these chatbots, except again, Code Convert. Code Convert was mostly just you put the prompt in, you get the output. It wasn't really much more than that. But all of these other ones would give explanations about the code without you having to ask them for an explanation. So basically it'd come along with it, which someone with little experience could definitely benefit from that. As well as I have my overall scores. So these scores are on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the best and 1 being, or well, 5 being good and then 1 being more negative. So as you can see, Code Convert, of course, due to the fact that it had a lot less features as well as some issues, got a 1. And as you can, then Copilot, on the other hand, got a 5 due to its efficiency. It kept the size of the file down. It was able to, it gave you all of the benefits of like, it can debug, it can refactor, and it also gives an explanation. So it was basically, out of these ones, I would say the most efficient and user-friendly. Now, I will emphasize again, none of these tools were necessarily bad. So all of them could be used to complete programs. Right. Okay. So as I said, all the services were able to generate code that ran successfully with little to no error. The highest score was Copilot, while the lowest score was Code Convert. The chatbots were generally user-friendly. As I mentioned, they required little to no experience, and many of them provided additional explanations. However, one of the issues that we could run into here for people using it is the complex problems could still present a challenge for inexperienced users. Because while I did have more complex prompts later on, or like towards the bottom of like the prompts, I didn't have an extremely complex like problem that they were like solving. Like for example, like with stuff with cybersecurity, like while it did okay with like the client server messaging stuff, I still can see people getting confused onto like exactly like how that code like interacts like with an actual system. So they would be able to basically if you have anyone that would be experienced in that field, I would not want them generating code for that without having a human who actually knows the ins and outs of cybersecurity as well as like its structure and everything, looking over that. That was probably like one of the most that was probably apologies, they turned the lights out on me. Probably one of the most nervous I was to run because I definitely checked that one a lot more because I didn't want anything actually happening to my computer system while running this. And this work was funded by the NSF. I'd like to thank them. Does anyone have any questions?
So first of all, thank you very much for that very nice talk, and it's really overwhelming how that field is expanding with all these different types of chatbots and so on. So thank you very much for the overview and the comparison. So there's some time for a question. Yes, Dr. Ryman Khan, I see. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the nice presentation. I have one question for you. If somebody is trying to learn coding as a novice, which of these system would you recommend?
If someone is trying to learn coding with the AI, again, I would recommend Copilot, not only because it got a higher score, but also because Copilot has an integration into like VS Code to where you can have it directly with you while coding. Again, I'd recommend learning coding, at least learning the basics, the traditional way, at least in sense of like industry standard and like the basic structuring and what's good structuring compared to like a bad structuring. So at least you can identify when the AI is maybe giving you a bad structure. But yes, Copilot would do pretty good because it does also have an integration directly into the workplace where you can type in code.
Thank you.